In the field of medicine, the Quran says in Surah Nahl, chapter number 16, verse number 69, from the belly of the bee, we give you a drink of varying colors in which there is healing for humankind. We did not know previously that the honey is obtained from the belly of the bee. We came to know hardly 300 years back that the honey we have is from the belly of the bee. And today science tells us that the honey is rich in vitamin K and fructose, and it even has mild antiseptic properties. No wonder the Russian soldiers in World War II, they used honey to cover up their wounds. And when the honey was put, the healing was done with leaving very little scar tissue. And germs and bacteria could not grow in the wound because of the density of honey. And if a person is suffering from the allergy of a particular plant, if honey produced from that plant is given to him, he starts developing resistance to that allergy. In the field of physiology, there's one particular verse which talks about the blood circulation and the production of milk. It was 600 years after the Quran was revealed that Ibn Nafis first described the blood circulation. And 400 years after Ibn Nafis, William Harvey made it common to the world. 1,000 years after the Quran was revealed and 400 years after Ibn Nafis spoke about the blood circulation, William Harvey made it famous to the Western world. In our textbook, we read about William Harvey, we don't read the name Ibn Nafis. Ibn Nafis was the first person who described the blood circulation. Just in a nutshell, the food that we eat, it enters the stomach. From the stomach, it goes to the intestine. From the intestine, the constituents of the food via the blood vessel of the intestine go into the bloodstream. And it reaches almost all the different organs of the body, many a time via the complex way of the liver. It also reaches the mammary glands, which is responsible for the production of milk. All this complex blood circulation and the production of milk is mentioned in a nutshell in the Quran, in Surah Nahl, chapter number 16, verse number 66, where it says that verily in the cattle is a lesson for you. We give you to drink from what is within the body, coming from a constituent of the contents of the intestine and blood, milk which is pure for you to have. Quran repeats the message in Surah Mu'minun, chapter number 23, verse number 21. Verily in the cattle is a sign for you. We give you to drink from what is within the body, milk which is pure for you. And in it are various benefits, and of their meat you can eat. The Quran speaks about the blood circulation and the production of milk in a nutshell, which we came to know recently. Quran mentions 1400 years ago. In the field of embryology, there were a group of Arab students who collected all the verses of the Quran dealing with embryology. Embryology means the study of the development of the human being. Embryo is when a human being is in the womb of the mother. In that stage, it's called as an embryo, the early stages. So embryology is the study of the development of a human being. So a group of Arab students collected all the verses of the Quran and the Hadith dealing with embryology and followed the verse of the Quran of Surah Nahl, chapter 16, verse 43, and Surah Anbiya, chapter number 21, verse number 7, which says, "Fasalu ahli zikri in kuntum la ta'lamun." If you don't know, ask the person who's an expert. So they collected all the verses of the Quran and the Hadith, and they translated into English, and they took it to Professor Keith Moore. This was in the late part of the 1970s. And they took it to Professor Keith Moore, who that time was one of the highest authority in the field of embryology. He was the head of the Department of Anatomy in the University of Toronto in Canada. And when the translation of these verses of the Quran and the Hadith dealing with embryology was shown to him and was asked for his comments, he said that most of the verses of the Quran and the Hadith which speak about embryology are 100% in conformity with what modern science has come to know recently. But there are a couple of verses which I cannot say is correct. Neither can I say it is wrong because I myself don't know about it. Two such verses were the first two verses of the Quran to be revealed. That is from Surah Iqra or Surah Alaq, chapter 96, verse number 1 to 2, which says, Iqra, Bismi Rabbika allazi khalaq. Khalaqal insana min alaq. Read, recite in the name of the Lord, who has created human beings from something which clings, a leech-like substance. So Professor Keith Moore said, I do not know whether the embryo looks like a leech or not. So he went in his laboratory and under a very powerful microscope, observed the early stage of an embryo and compared it with a photograph of a leech And he was astonished at the striking resemblance. Later on, when more than 80 questions were asked him about embryology, he said, I would not be able to answer more than 50% if you would have asked me these 30 years back. Because embryology is a new branch of medicine developed recently. This he said in the late 1970s. Now it has developed, and what you're asking me, I can answer because in the last 30 years, that means in early 1950s or late 1940s, we came to know about this. And Quran speaks about them 14 years ago. And Professor Keith Moore said, I have no objection in agreeing that this Quran is the word of Almighty God and Prophet Muhammad is the messenger of God. Quran says in Surah Tariq, chapter number 86, verse number 5 to 7, does not man think from what is created? He is created from a drop emitted from a space between the backbone and the ribs. What does the Quran mean by saying that human beings have been created from a drop emitted from a space between the backbone and the ribs? Today, after science advance, we have come to know that the genital organs in the human being, in the male, that is the testes, in the female, the ovaries, they initially develop in the embryonic age in a space where the kidney is present between the backbone and the ribs. And later on, it descends down. In the male, it descends via the inguinal canal into the scrotum, and in the female, it descends to the true pelvis. Even after the descent in the adult life, after the child is born, yet they receive the blood supply and the nerve supply from the same space where the kidney is present between the backbone and the 11th and 12th rib. And even the venous return goes back to the same space between the backbone and the 11th and 12th rib. Quran says in Surah Mu'minun, chapter number 23, verse number 13, and Surah Hajj, chapter number 22, verse number 5, that we have created the human being from a nutfa. A nutfa in Arabic means a minute quantity of liquid, very small. Today science tells us out of the 300 million sperms emitted in a normal ejaculation in a male, only one sperm is sufficient for fertilizing the ovum, which the Quran refers to as nutfa. Quran says in Surah Sajda, chapter number 32, verse number 8, we have created the human beings from solala. Solala in Arabic means the best part of the whole. The one sperm out of the 300 million sperms which fertilizes the ovum, the Quran refers to as solala, the best part of the whole. The Quran says in Surah Insan, chapter number 79, verse number 2, we have created the human being from nutfatin amshaj, a minute quantity of mingled fluid. Besides the spermatic fluid, there is a requirement of seminal fluid and other fluids which is responsible for the birth of the child. The Quran says in Surah Az-Zumar, chapter number 39, verse number 6, that we have created the human beings in the womb of the mother in stages, one after the other, in three veils of darkness. When Professor Keith Moore was shown this verse of the Quran, he said that these three veils of darkness mentioned in the Quran refers to the anterior abdominal wall, it refers to the uterine wall and the amniochorionic membrane. Imagine what science came to know recently. Quran mentioned 1400 years ago. We have created the human beings in the womb of the mother in stages one after the other in three veils of darkness. In the field of genetics, today science tells us that the human beings have got 23 pairs of chromosomes. And the 23rd pair of chromosome is responsible for the sex of the child. If it's XX, it's a female. If it's XY, then it's a male. And today science tells us it is the male sperm which deciphers the sex of the child. If the X of the male takes part in fertilization, then a female is born. If the Y of the male sperm takes part in fertilization, then a male is born. So it is the male fluid, the sperm, which determines the sex of the child. And this is exactly what the Quran says 14 years ago. It's mentioned in Surah Najm, chapter number 54, verse number 45, 46. It says, we have created the human beings from a minute quantity of liquid gushing forth from a male and then gave it sexes, male and female. The Arabic word is sumna, gushing forth from a male. The Quran says in Surah Qiyamah, chapter number 75, verse number 37 to 39, that we have created the human being from a minute quantity of sperm. Nutfatan min man yumna. Minute quantity of sperm. Then made it into an alaka. Then made the alaka into mudga. Then gave it sex, male and female. The Quran says it is a minute quantity of sperm which is responsible for the sex of the child. The country where I come from, India, people, for reasons best known to them, they prefer having sons rather than daughters. So if a daughter-in-law gives birth to a daughter, many a time the mother-in-law will blame the daughter-in-law. Why did you give birth to a daughter? Why didn't you give birth to a son? Whether it's son or a daughter is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Almighty God. But according to Quran and according to the science, if you have to blame anyone, you have to blame the son, not the daughter-in-law, because the male is responsible for the different sex of the child, not the female. Quran says in Surah Insan, chapter number 76, verse number 2, that we have given the human beings the faculty of hearing and sight. Today's science tells us the first sense to develop in the human being, it is the sense of hearing. At the 5th month of pregnancy, a child is able to hear. And in the 7th month, the eyes split open. First comes hearing, then comes sight. That's the reason the psychologists tell us that you should not see horror movie when a lady is pregnant. It can damage your child. You should not do wrong things. And that's what the hadith says, that you have to read the Quran. It helps your child. There was a survey done that newborn children taken from 10 mothers, newborn children. One child belonged to a mother who was a typist. That was 30, 40 years back, where there were manual typewriters. And the remaining 9 were from normal mothers. After they were born, and when the typewriter was sounded, 9 children from those 10 were scared. But the child which belonged to a typist, he wasn't scared because he was used to hearing the typewriter in the womb of the mother. The Quran says first comes the sense of hearing, then comes sight.